This is Tilbury, where on June the 22nd, 1948, a ship known as the MV Empire Windrush sailed into port. Aboard 500 migrants from Commonwealth Caribbean islands. They became known as the Windrush generation. Neither they nor their children could possibly have known that more than 70 years later, they would be still fighting for their rights.
Arrivals at Tilbury. The Empire Windrush brings to Britain 500 Jamaicans. Many are ex-servicemen who know England. They served this country well. In Jamaica, they couldn't find work. Discouraged but full of hope, they sailed for Britain. Citizens of the British Empire coming to the mother country with good intent. Prodded by public opinion, the Colonial Office gives them a more cordial reception than was at first envisaged. Many are to be found jobs. Our reporter asks them what they want to do.
Now, why have you come to England? To seek a job. And what sort of job do you want? Any type, so long as I get a good pay.
From 2013, the Windrush generation started to receive letters claiming they'd no right to be in the UK. In other words, they were illegal immigrants. Michael Braithwaite, who arrived in Britain from Barbados in 1961, had worked at a primary school for more than 5 years when a routine check revealed he didn't have an up-to-date identity document. He was sacked, despite the fact that he'd lived in the UK for more than 50 years. He said his difficulties had come close to destroying his life.
I went back to my work. They said, well, we have to dismiss you from your employment because you cannot prove your status.
What was that moment like?
That was devastating. You know, I had thoughts of taking my life. At my age, to be put in a boat or plane to send back to the Caribbean, where I left many years ago, I have not visited apart from my dad dying and my mum dying. You know, this is my home. And for me, that was nightmares, disillusionment, walking around the streets thinking, whoever going to tap on my shoulder. I was very suspicious about everyone. I was suspicious about any person that looked at me a bit funny as I was walking down the street. And in the end, I decided to stay indoors. I think there's a massive racist policy in the Home Office because, you know, when I looked at some of the people that dealt with me, this young man, he was not willing to even give me an eyelid, never even looked me in my eye, never even asked me any questions about who I am.
Glenda Caesar lived in London since she came from Dominica when she was 6 months old and worked for the National Health Service for 20 years. In 2009, she lost her job as she didn't have the paperwork to prove she could legally work in the UK. The stress was so heavy, she, like Michael, also contemplated suicide.
I cried. It was affecting my children. I got to the stage where I ended up going to the doctors to sort of like let him know that I'm depressed now and I'm contemplating suicide.
The Windrush Compensation Scheme was launched in 2018, with the British government setting aside up to £500 million. So far, only £1 million has been paid out. The vast majority of claimants have received nothing. What's behind this delay in your life?
This is something we're trying to work out, and I hate to use the race card, but to me that's what it comes over like, because the people who have been affected are people of colour.
Paulette Wilson, who died aged 64, is one of 9 claimants who passed away without receiving compensation. Holly Stowe is a paralegal at the North Kensington Law Centre and is working with 40 Windrush claimants. She alleges the Home Office is deliberately dragging its feet.
The barriers and hurdles that are put in front of the claimants by the Home Office caseworkers to mitigate their losses, to find further evidence, just to be offered something abysmal as like £250 for a huge loss on someone's life is horrendous. I mean, the Home Office caseworkers are not taking this serious enough. They're not speaking to victims to really understand what they've gone through, and it's showing through these offers.
Mr. Speaker, I share the honourable gentleman's admiration.
The opposition Labour Party consistently hammers the government over the ongoing Windrush scandal, especially delays in payments.
When my parents and their generation arrived in this country under the Nationality Act of 1948, they arrived here as British citizens. It is inhumane and cruel for so many of that Windrush generation to have suffered so long? Can she tell the House how many have been denied health under the National Health Service? How many have denied pensions? How many have lost their job? This is a day of national shame. If you lay down with dogs, you get fleas. And that is what has happened with this far-right rhetoric in this country.
The Home Office has issued a statement. It says, "We're determined to right the wrongs of the Windrush generation and the Windrush compensation scheme." It goes on, "We continue to work with families to ensure compensation is still paid out where claimants have sadly passed away." Later, the Home Office reacted to allegations of racism, and a spokesperson told Arise News, "We reject any suggestion the Windrush compensation scheme is discriminatory. The scheme is more inclusive and open than any other compensation scheme in the UK, and we're currently recruiting a permanent independent advisor who will scrutinise delivery of the scheme and continue to provide recommendations." Where do you go from here, Glenda?
I'm still fighting, and I'm here for you to help others who are going through it as well.
I've been battered, and I've stood up, and they pointed to the point where I was going to give up, and I thought, no, I'm not going to give up.
And so the Windrush generation's fight goes on. The opening chapters of their life began with optimism and hope, the closing chapters with frustration and despair. John Cookson, Arise News, Tilbury.